I would like to introduce Paulina Acuña Gonzalez from Get Lit Poets. I'd like to introduce her. Please give her a big round of applause.
Hello, everybody. How are we all doing today? Good, very good. So I'm going to perform a poem for you all today, and it's basically about accepting beauty in every form, especially within yourself. It's called Ingenue. I'm not beautiful in the way that candlelight reflects on a window pane. My voice isn't fluffy white feathers floating in the air. My body isn't slender milkweed vines, soft to the touch, or ethereal soul going down smooth and sweet like melted Skittles. A kind of accessible attractiveness where one fits easily into the palm of the world's hand. The kind of beauty that makes you seem worthy, worth seeing, hearing, touching, loving. I don't enchant with the blush of glossy pink lips painted in the last rays of dawn in rainbows reflected in a delicate glass body. I'm not beautiful because I'm fragile. I'm beautiful because I'm unbreakable. I don't have dainty gliding feet. These size 12 and a half stompers make the earth convulse and upheave. I'm only as smooth as a rock eroded after years of being worn down by the rush of a river. No, I'm a mountain standing massive and magnificent. Screw accessibility. You want to get to me? Better start climbing. Try and move me, you'll split the earth in half. Try and break me, I'll break your legs. I'm learning to take the box I never fit into and craft a cardboard spaceship. I'm learning it's okay to take up some space as you grow into yourself, and I refuse to shrink for anybody. Because for every person who loves laying in meadows, there's somebody who loves dancing in rainstorms. But then again, when lightning strikes, it doesn't care who's watching. Thank you.
Thank you, Paulina. Thank you very much. I've known Paulina since she was a baby. So it's amazing to see you grow up to such a wonderful, blossoming young girl. I'm very proud of you. Thank you for being here. In this day and age, when feminism is both attacked and celebrated, this can sometimes be confusing for young women as they're developing their own identity. I think it's important that we support one another and give platforms like this for our stories to be told so that our young women can learn about and gain role models. Today we are welcoming a great role model for these young women of our great state. Someone who has similar goals of sharing women's stories and advancing the rights of women and girls, and you will get a chance to hear from her in a moment. But before I begin, I would like to thank and recognize some individuals that are here tonight that joined us in back of the chambers, and I hope they're still here. We had our city attorney Mike Fear. Is he still here? Our city controller Ron Galpin was also here with us, and I know I saw board president of LA Unified School District Monica Garcia. Can you please stand, Monica? Thank you for being here. I want to also thank our partners and supporters who have helped us get the word out and make sure that this event was available to students. We have LA's Promise Fund, we have Legacy LA, we have Monroe High School, Alliance MIT in Sun Valley, Poly High School, yes, clap for yourselves if you're here. Poly High School, Panorama City High School, I think you are here as well, and Van Nuys High School. Let's give these young students a big round of applause. Thank you for being here. Through your assistance, we were able to bring over 200 students to this event today, so thank you all for your participation. 2018, we celebrated the Year of the Women, and indeed, we have reached records and heights in political representation. In 2019, I'm looking to expand and grow upon the achievements of last year, from building new leaders in our communities to working to expand legislation and programs that empower and support women across this country. For me, I want 2019 to be a year we support women to be able to bond with their families after childbirth and not have to worry about hurrying back to work because they depend on their paycheck to survive. Since I was elected 5 years ago, I have worked every day to ensure that our city is a better, friendlier place for working families. This year, my big push, along with my colleague, Councilmember David Rue, is to bring a comprehensive paid family leave program to the city of Los Angeles so that families, not just the middle or upper class families, will have the ability to bond with their babies. For too long, families have had to decide between having kids and keeping a paycheck. And this is totally and completely unfair. Families deserve to thrive and succeed in the city of LA. Our current system doesn't work for low-wage workers. People who are surviving off of minimum wage can't often take or receive the opportunities to be able to take a partial salary pay cut. That's just almost impossible for them to do. Los Angeles is such a hard place for working people hoping to start a family. From the cost of rent to the cost of living and the cost of supporting a family, I hope that this legislation will help our residents live slightly less stressful lives. I need your help. I need your help to join me in becoming an advocate and supporter for comprehensive paid family leave in Los Angeles. Together, we can show the rest of the state that by supporting families, our state will thrive. I am very proud to welcome someone who is an advocate and a supporter of women and girls, and I'm surely to be a supporter of bringing paid family leave to Los Angeles. Jennifer Siebel Newsom is a filmmaker and advocate and a thought leader and our first partner in California. She has written and directed and produced the 2011 award-winning documentary Misrepresentation. As a result of Misrepresentation's powerful impact, she launched the Representation Project, a nonprofit that uses film and media as a catalyst for cultural transformation. Jennifer's second film, The Mask You Live In, made its world premiere in 2015 and explores on how cultural narrow definition of masculinity is harming boys and men and society at large. She is currently wrapping up her third film, The Great American Lie. She and her husband, Governor Gavin Newsom, are the proud parents of 4 young children, Montana, Hunter, and Brooklyn, and Dutch. And I think Dutch made his stage premiere at the governor's inauguration a couple of months ago. But Jennifer has built the public persona as a documentary filmmaker and advocate focusing on gender relations and is becoming California's first partner at a moment when gender politics in our country is at a forefront. For the first time, we have the first partner in California, and I want to look forward to working with her on important issues facing women and girls in California. Please help me welcome California's first partner, Jennifer Siebel Newsom. And thank you very much for being here. Let's look at how wonderful this audience looks this evening. Thank you very much for being here. Do you want to just say a few words, a little bit about yourself, and then we can get into questions?
Hi, everyone. Happy Women's History Month. This is a really important month. As we know, in America, there are a lot of women that have contributed to this great nation whose stories haven't necessarily been included in our history books. I'm actually sitting on the National Women's Suffragette Centennial Commission, which will launch our first activities in June of this year and then culminate next August, August 26, 2020. And our goal really is to illuminate and celebrate all of the incredible women across not just the great state of California, but across the nation, the diverse women whose stories were not written in the history books, whose stories maybe haven't been shared publicly, whose stories maybe aren't even known. And I look forward to celebrating all of that with you. My background is largely one that has been focused on uplifting women and girls. Out of Stanford undergrad, I lived and worked in Africa and Latin America, helping women to create microenterprises and environmentally sustainable microenterprises. I was really focused on investing in women because we all know that when you invest in women, women take the proceeds of that investment and put that money into their family, into their children's nutrition, their health care, their education, etc. And so I've always focused on women and girls. And when I was at Stanford Business School, the drama department was actually right next door. And I spent a little time over there. I had the good fortune of attending a class called Business and Entertainment. And Sigourney Weaver came and visited us one day at Stanford Business School. And I was reminded of the power of media and of the power of certain brands in media to affect cultural change. And so I ended up having a stint in the entertainment industry after Stanford Business School. And when I was in the industry is really when I noticed this dearth of women, both in front of and behind the camera, but also the misrepresentations of women in front of the camera. And it dawned on me that this was a narrative that needed to be illuminated vis-a-vis documentary film. And so Misrepresentation was born, and we sold to Oprah Winfrey Network after premiering at the Sundance Film Festival. And that was really the beginning of my feminist journey. And through premiering Misrepresentation, I launched the Representation Project, and would travel the world with Misrepresentation, speaking about our girls and women. And everywhere I was, from Abu Dhabi to Singapore to neighborhood schools, people would thank me for making Misrepresentation. But ultimately, there would be people in the audiences who would ask about our boys. And that's why I did the research and started delving into the boy crisis in America, and discovered that, you know, compared to girls in America, boys were more likely to be diagnosed with a behavior disorder. They were more likely to be prescribed meds. They were more likely to binge drink. They were more likely to be expelled from school. Boys were more likely to commit a violent crime, and boys were more likely to take their own lives. So I knew then and there, as I was pregnant with our second child, a son, I knew that we needed to do more to investigate and pull the curtain back on what was happening to our boys and men, not just for their own well-being and so that we could raise the next generation of healthy, whole human beings, but so that we could help our boys and men be a part of the larger gender equity solution. And so that's when my documentary, The Mask You Live In, was born. And just to conclude, The Great American Lie, which we're premiering next month at the San Francisco Film Festival, and which we'll bring to Los Angeles shortly thereafter, is a documentary that really looks at our unique American values and how everything that we've quote-unquote feminized in American culture, whether entire industries like education, healthcare, etc., or just attributes like empathy, care, and collaboration, that because of the devaluation of all of those, all that we've feminized, we actually have this incredible, inequitable system whereby social and economic mobility has never been as poor. So with California, for example, being both the richest and the poorest state in our country, we know that we have a lot of work to do to ensure that every California resident achieves that, not just the American dream, but I like to say the California dream. So those are some of the issues that I will continue to work on and champion as first partner, California.
Give her a big round of applause. So let's get started. So tell us a little bit about your personal journey and what your childhood was like, and sort of, did you grow up with a feminist upbringing in your household, or how did you become such a staunch feminist? Where did that start?
Great question. I grew up in a conservative household. We grew up revering Ronald Reagan because we just did. My father did, therefore we did. And but my mother, I'm one of 5 girls. I lost my older sister in an accident, so there were 4 of us ultimately that survived. And my mother always taught me, because I became the eldest after my sister died, my mother always taught me to be a leader. So whether I had to be a leader on the sports field or a leader at home with my sisters or a role model for my sisters, there was a lot of emphasis on me being a leader. And frankly, feminism in my family was probably a dirty word, unfortunately. And I don't think I really had a feminist awakening until I made Misrepresentation. I just think that I always saw women as equal and wanted women to have equal opportunity. And I know that my parents see that and want that, and my dad's always been the biggest champion of women, especially marginalized and vulnerable women. But unfortunately, his politics led him in a you know, in a direction that is sort of in conflict with seeing women as equal. So that's the household that I grew up in.
It's interesting because someone just asked me the same question a couple of weeks ago in terms of, you know, did I grow up in a you know, predominantly, I'm Mexican American, very Catholic upbringing, but I often say that my father was a feminist in my family. That even though my mother's a very strong figure in our family, it was my father who propelled my sister and I to take a lead, and it was always so incredibly encouraging to my mother to make sure that she was the strong figure, the person that we you know, followed her lead, because that's just the household that I grew up in. But so many of my friends weren't, and so I can relate to a lot of my friends being brought up by very conservative fathers who didn't necessarily allow their mothers to lead. So I was very fortunate. So I just wanted to get a sense as to how you were raised. So thank you for sharing that. My next question is, you made misrepresentation in 2011. And since then, the growing influence in social media on beauty standards and gender roles have skyrocketed. And so, you know, how do you encourage the youth in the audience, or our youth in general, to challenge themselves and to have informed opinions that aren't necessarily influenced by social media? I think that can be, social media can have its pros and cons. Yeah. But so much of our influence is being dictated by social media. Is there any advice you can give our young people in terms of how are you able to form your own opinion and not necessarily depend on what social media is dictating?
Mm-hmm. Well, remember that media in general is a construction that likes to bifurcate things and put people into boxes to sell products to those people, or to make people feel insecure so that they then buy a product. Yes, other media is there to entertain, but media historically, right, the advent of really the advertising industry in particular was during the Mad Men era, right, where it was about putting women into the pretty little box and men into the sort of, you know, father knows best breadwinner box. Father in power, mother submissive, and maybe walking on eggshells. And so I think you have to deconstruct media, and recognizing that media is full of stereotypes. I think you also have to recognize that there are addictive tendencies to media. And I think, and I'll focus on the negative and then I'll end on the positive, I think one of the downsides of media is that media is separating us from each other. I am worried about future generations. I'm worried about the generation before my children and my children's generation because of the addictive tendencies of media and the lack of longitudinal studies, or the oppression of those, of the dangers and the downside of those longitudinal studies on children's brains and on relationships. Because at the end of the day, like, if we don't have relationships, if we can't make eye contact, if we're not in relation with each other and even just ourselves, what do we have? Like, what's the purpose of life if it's not about relationship and community and being and sharing experiences with people? So I think those are some of the things that we need to examine, just as we have to examine that limiting narrative that the media and social media continues to spread, that a man's value lies in power, dominance, and aggression, and that a woman's value lies in her youth, beauty, and sexuality. They're very conflicting, damaging messages, and then you add race and ethnicity and class into the mix, and it gets even more confusing and more oppressive, or limiting. So just, I think media literacy is critical. I don't think it's as available to all of you as it should be. I think the upside of media is it's brought us together. And obviously there have been incredible movements that have shifted not just attitudes and behaviors, but that have transformed culture. And we've had the wonderful opportunity through the Representation Project to launch campaigns like Not Buying It, which was credited for transforming the portrayals of women and girls in advertising during the Super Bowls. So if you remember, a few years ago, there were very sexist ads women, like GoDaddy ads and Teleflora, that just completely objectified and limited women and girls to what we looked like, and as you know, products purely for the male gaze. And I remember after that campaign, and I think it was 7,500 individuals that tweeted at GoDaddy, that the CEO of GoDaddy at the time actually responded to me that they'd read all of the messages and the narratives, and that they ended up making a major shift. They actually fired the CEO, and they ended up bringing in a whole new PR and marketing strategy, and they've transformed their whole advertising, which is great. And then another positive campaign that was enabled vis-a-vis social media was our Ask Her More campaign, where we were credited for transforming the cultural conversation on the red carpet, such that news hosts and reporters were really no longer allowed to ask a woman who she was wearing or what she was wearing, but really had to celebrate women for their talents and accomplishments as leaders in their own right, as human beings, as talented artists who are so much more than the dress that they're wearing. And we feel strongly that that campaign in particular really kind of motivated, inspired, and galvanized the voice of women in entertainment that led to the campaign that you all are probably most aware of, which is the Me Too movement. And so when you think about all of these campaigns and social media has been very good in terms of bringing us together. But obviously there are so many other downsides, like bullying and all the other negatives that we still haven't addressed as a society.
Well, you know, I gotta say that as a mom of a 10-year-old, having social media and having such an influence on my daughter, it terrifies me. It terrifies me because social media is dictating what little girls should look like. And it bothers me because the whole bullying factor comes in, and so how can social media have more impact in my daughter's life than me? So I think as parents, I think I didn't grow up with social media, and thank God for that. But I can imagine parents who are going through the same struggle I am in terms of minimizing the amount of time on that iPad and the content that they're actually watching, and making sure that that isn't filling their mind, and that I have some sort of more of an impact in her upbringing. So it's terrifying, but.
One of the things that I want to do in the first partner role is bring together players in both the technology arena and the media arena who can be our allies and who are willing to be leaders in terms of outing the addiction tendencies that they're conscious of, and creating a media and technology culture that enables a healthier, more balanced society. So I have visions for what we can do.
Sign me up for that.
I know.
I'd like to,
because
I'd like to figure out how to do that, because it's a fight at my home. It's a fight every day.
Yeah.
To get her off that darn iPad and
Yeah.
say there's got to be conversations at home.
Yeah.
You cannot be addicted to this device. It's frightening.
It
really
is. And to your point, what is most sort of pernicious is the fact that many tech creators send their kids to Waldorf school, where media is not allowed, and don't allow their children to have access to the technology that they're making billions of dollars off of.
What an irony.
Yeah. So again, like, know what you're being sold, and be a part of the change, because we don't want to live in a society where we can't look each other in the eyes, we can't break bread and have a conversation over a meal. That is not, I mean, open up the newspaper, turn on the TV, you see how divisive we become. And some would say, oh, it's just the current administration. Well, no, I like to remind us that the president that we elected is a reflection of our cultural values.
That's right.
Our reality show, lowest common denominator, cultural values. So if you're consuming tabloid media, reality TV, if you uphold that, if you are on your phone all day long, if you're part of that. We're all a part of that, and we have to look at our complicity in creating this culture that has become so horrifically xenophobic, bigoted, sexist, misogynistic, racist, and we can put a stop to it. I mean, this is the power, once again, of social media. Channel all, I want to do, like with youth in particular, I want to challenge all of you to utilize your brains and your strategic thinking and maybe even your rebelliousness into creating a new culture, a culture that is more inclusive, that is more loving, and defy all of those brands and manufacturers and tech companies and entertainment companies that are talking down to you as if you're not smart enough to not be consumed by or addicted to their product. Do you know what I mean? So do what the youth did when we basically ended cigarette manufacturing sales to youth. They basically mocked all the manufacturers, and there's a wonderful book, it's called like Join the Club, and it talks about how they took back sort of health in our society and ended the reign of the cigarette manufacturers. I know it's changing with those, what are the things that youth,
E-cigarettes?
Yeah, with the e-cigarettes. I know that we have more work to do, but there was a period where youth basically utilized their rebellious nature to stand up to toxic manufacturers. And I feel strongly, not all media, not all technology, but there are enough that are harming your brains, which are still plastic, and not fully formed until you're in your late 20s. And you have a right to stand up to them, to not buy them, and to consume the good media. Celebrate the good media, consume the good media, consume the good technology. Take power back into your hands.
Yes. So your husband was inaugurated as California's governor in January, and you decided to take a different title. You decided not to take the First Lady title, and instead to take the First Partner title. Can you talk to us a little bit about that choice and what that means to you? Sure. I think the media often ask you that same question, but I want our audience to hear your answer. Yeah.
Yes, so First Partner was an extension of my work at the Representation Project, where we are deconstructing gender stereotypes. I wanted to question what it means to be a lady and challenge that notion that we're just ladies. Nothing wrong with being a lady, but I wanted to expand what's possible. And to me, First Partner is both gender expansive and gender inclusive. We're going to have a female governor, we're going to have an LGBTQ governor, and I wanted to be a part of the inspiration for the future. I also wanted to out what I think the future of not just California, but this country requires, which is a recognition of partnership. We are such an individualistic society. And I wanted to remind all of us that no one gets to a successful place on their own. There's always a partner or a teammate or a village behind that person, lifting that person up, elevating that person. And I think when we as a society spend more time talking about we versus me, we will transform our culture in ways that are breathtakingly positive.
I love that. I really do. I love that because you're so right. I mean, I think so many of us, as we talk about paid parental leave and what it means to raise a family and the partnership that it takes to raise children nowadays, I think that we so often forget about the partnership we have within our own marriages, right? I'm often talked about my husband and what a great guy he is, but I often never really celebrate his partnership and the fact that he's as equally as supportive as I am of his career. And I think so many of us, as we're trying to figure out our way through the world and who we end up dating or marrying or so on, we forget about the partnership of it all. And it really does take, I know for us that are married, it does take a village to help us out. And you only have 4 children. I mean, I only have 1, you have 4. So I can't even imagine. But I wanted to talk a little bit about, as First Partner, are you, I'm sure you have plans on how to make California a more gender equitable state. How do you see your role in advancing women and girls across the state as a first partner? What are some of your goals? Do you have any initiatives you want to talk about today?
Well, look, the female population in California is the largest female population in any state. We have a tremendous opportunity here in California to show the rest of the country what is possible when women lead, when women have seats at the tables of power, when women's voices are heard, when women are listened to and believed. So anything and everything that has to do with uplifting women's voices is important to me. I'm also very conscious of one of the most pernicious ways that we devalue women, which is the pay gap in California, and which is also the wealth gap in California. We all know, well, payday's coming up in a week, Equal Pay Day, and we'll be launching a campaign called Equal Pay California, where we're inspiring corporations, businesses, and the public sector to commit to take the pledge and basically follow the recommendations that were basically enacted through law to close the wage gap across the state. So that's exciting. And there are so many. And then when it comes to the wealth gap, let's out the fact that white women own 33 cents on the white man's $1 of wealth, and African American and Latino women own pennies on the white man's $1 of wealth. And in a capitalistic society, which the United States of America is, you need wealth to buy a car, own a home, et cetera, et cetera. And the women's wealth gap is so vast, not just in California, but across this country, that until we close that gap, again, we're not going to achieve parity. So we have a lot of work to do there as well. And then obviously, and you and I were talking about this earlier, we have to do more around paid family leave. We have to reduce the stigma with men taking paid leave and encourage more men to play a role in caregiving, just as we have to strengthen the state laws and local legislation. And then we have a lot to do with ensuring affordable childcare, universal preschool. There's a lot that we need to do, and I intend to support not just the governor's agenda on early childhood and education and ending childhood poverty in the state of California, but also obviously following the legislature's lead in supporting all of the incredible legislative policies that are in process or have already been passed that really will transform women's lives in the state of California.
My next question is, how are you ensuring that your kids are growing up without implied gender roles or gender expectations? And I think I struggle with that as well, but how are you, what are some of your suggestions?
So obviously every child is unique, and sometimes I turn to my husband and I'm like, I don't know who that kid is because it's not me. So please explain him to me. But in raising children, I think it's important to raise children as human beings. Certain children might gravitate towards dresses and dolls. Others might gravitate towards trucks and trains. But I like to play with exposing them to everything. So my eldest daughter, and both daughters, I'm doing what my parents did for me, which is exposing me to team sports, the outdoors, nature, getting their hands dirty, teaching them to take up space and use their voice and be a leader. And with my boys, I'm exposing them, because I don't think our society or our culture exposes them enough to care and caregiving. So we've increasingly sort of brought animals into our lives, and we have pets that they have to care for. I've given our boys dolls, even if they tear the head off. I've given them dolls to learn that care and caregiving is not just an activity that's reserved for women, but that it's also an activity that is a responsibility of men. I've encouraged my son Hunter to cook. He loves to cook. Cooking, again, should not be reserved for women, and I know many of you probably have men in your lives who are better cooks than you are. I think my husband sometimes is a better cook than I am, or at least he thinks he is. But I think just expand what's possible and raise your kids as human beings. And try and it's hard because of social media and advertising and media across the board, but try and break down or deconstruct stereotypes. So watch media with them, read with them. Oh, another thing I've always done, because when I gave birth to Montana, there weren't as many books out there with empowering messages for young girls. Now I feel like there's just an array of young books for girls with female protagonists, but if you look historically at the books that many of those who are my generation and above were exposed to, the protagonists, with the exception of like Laurel Ingalls Wilder and maybe Nancy Drew, the protagonists tended to be men. And so what I've done with both my daughters and my sons is, if I'm reading a book and the protagonist is a male, I just change the he to a she. And it just normalizes for my sons in particular. I don't even just do it for my girls. I do it for my sons because I want them to see that women can be the center of a story, that women matter, that women are interesting.
I know I'm almost going to wrap up, so some of our audience have a lot of questions, so I want to give them the opportunity. But it's interesting you say that, because growing up, I think I could have benefited, even though I had a very strong mother figure at home. I think I could have benefited from seeing women firefighters. I could have benefited from seeing women, the first women mayor of the city of Los Angeles, or the first woman governor of the state of California. And I think for me, and one of the things I try to expose my daughter to is the fact that we traditionally don't think as a career in fire as a career for women. And so part of what I try to instill in some of our young girls is to be able to think outside of the box and expose them to these careers and create that pipeline so they can see themselves as one day future firefighters for the city of LA or what have you. And I think so many times my generation of girls just certainly didn't have that opportunity. We never saw those role models on TV. And so I often say, you can't be what you can't see. And so we try to grab those girls and expose them to these careers. And I think having you here is amazing. And part of what I try to do with these events is try to bring the girls from communities that don't often get to see that. They don't often have that opportunity to live next door to someone who is a woman firefighter or a woman police officer or a woman engineer or so on. And so I applaud you for all your work that you're doing on gender equity. I just think we need to continue to talk about, you're right, women as a center of a story, and women as being important in everyone's life. So I'm going to do one last question before I open it up to the audience. What's next on your horizon? I know we talked about your next film, but what are you looking forward to in terms of you as a filmmaker? Do you want to elaborate a little bit more on your next film?
Well, so there's so many exciting things happening in California, and I mean, next week we launch this equal pay partnership with the California Commission on the Status of Women and Time's Up. We've just been up and down the state championing the earned income tax credit for lower income families so that they know the resources that are available to them and their families. We want to really launch a State of California Women sort of baseline so that we know where we have to go, and so that annually we can measure that, and through partnership with all the nonprofits and corporate entities working in the space, that we can actually measure our success over the next few years. There's a lot of work to be done. We have an incredible legislature that's really excited about my husband's focus and priority on ending childhood poverty and ensuring that we begin at the beginning and really focusing on early childhood and education. There's just a lot of work to be done, and so it's that juggle that I think all of us women have of moving forward, making sure that what you're doing matters and that there's an impact, and measuring that impact, while also, raising a family and ensuring 2 of my children have learning differences that we know of. They're very young, so maybe another 1 or 2 do, maybe all of them do. And that requires those of you who have challenges or just differences. I think we all learn differently anyway, but our current education system isn't really built for those with learning differences, and so there's a lot that we will do and can do, and I'm looking forward to that. But I also have to kind of make sure my kids are okay in the process, obviously, and they will be. They're resilient, but it's a juggling act. And that said, it's one of the reasons why I'm the biggest champion of men playing a larger role in caregiving, because I think women have been holding everything on their plates and carrying everything on their shoulders for way too long. And I think that men are missing out and wanting more time with their kids if they don't have enough, and wanting to be at home cooking and coaching soccer and whatever it is, caring for an elderly family member. I think at the end of the day, we're all kind of like in this place in history maybe where we're recognizing what it is to ultimately deconstruct all these gender roles and ultimately be human. And that's exciting to me. So, I'll just continue to kind of do my work and try and deconstruct all of these like limiting narratives about ultimately what it means to be human, and trying to uplift the women in particular of California and ensure that we really begin at the beginning and ensure that every child in this state gets the best opportunity in life to fulfill their dreams and their human potential.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we have a couple of mics out in the audience. Is that right? We do. Oh, my mic. You're going to take my mic. Okay. Let's go ahead. And do we have anyone that wants to ask a question? We have someone in the back. We have 2 back here.
As the First Lady, welcome to Los Angeles.
Gracias.
As a Mexican, I'm here to speak on behalf of the Mexican community. During this difficult time, we see how there is a current atmosphere where we are targeted as a community. And there's a lot of things going on with deportation, but that history goes back many years. And so we have to make amends, and I hope that the governor looks at the history of that deportation. We had over 1.5 million Mexican Americans deported during repatriation. I call on him to do a study about that and make amends. We had many Mexicans as braceros having to deal with wage theft. To this day, that wage theft has not been given back to them. We have a split between the Mexican government and the United States government, saying that many Mexicans have to go back to Mexico to receive those wages, when many of them never went back and are here today and are American citizens. We demand that their wages be paid. We have a crisis at our border, but that crisis is the San Onofre nuclear power plant. And last week, they voted in Texas to postpone a very important situation, and that is to extract that nuclear waste, because it is a meltdown. Water is life. And I testified in front of your husband regarding the water systems that are right there to do desalination. You cannot extract nuclear waste from any of these fake watering filtering systems. And so I have many issues, but I wanted to rise as a mujer en pie de lucha to say that all of these issues affect families, and women are the backbone of those families, and so are men. But as First Lady, I hope you hear our voice, you do these studies, and in solidarity with the Black community and those that have charged forward with ADOS to also look into the issue of reparations. Thank you.
I hear you, and I thank you for speaking the truth and sharing your story and the story of your friends and allies and community. Some hope for you is that we are 100% committed to the Mexican American, the El Salvadoran American, et cetera, communities. And I share that. We actually were just at a press conference communicating with, listening to, learning from the El Salvadorian community as we plan for a trip to El Salvador to better understand the immigration crisis and what's going on, not just at our borders, which we've been investigating, but in El Salvador, and how we can make amends and deal with the crisis that we have at the border and the failures in our deportation system and our criminal justice system.
You can project. I love it. Come here. Come up here. That's right. Come, go around the rope, and then here's my microphone, and you can go ahead and answer your question from here. Thank you for being so bold. Then here you go. Ask your question.
Okay. So my name is Leslie, and I'm currently a political science student at Cal State Northridge. And I'm actually, thank you. And I'm actually accompanied here today with my colleague, Catherine. She's also a political science student. And so as political science students, we often find ourselves in spaces that are dominated by men and by male voices. And especially as Latinas, we find it very easy to feel silenced and ignored. So my question for both of you is, what is your advice for young women hoping to break out into the political and law field, and to do it feeling confident in our voices and feeling confident that we're able to make choices in our communities, even though we feel silenced? So thank you.
Well, that's a great question.
Thank you.
My advice is come an intern or intern for any political body, build relationships, believe in yourself, remind yourself that you deserve to have a seat at the table, and we need you to have a seat at the table.
So I love this question. So, I broke into politics when I was about 14 and 15 years old. And so my story was, first of all, campaigns and anyone who's running for office love young energy. We love young people because you have so much energy. And so part of my growth in politics, or how I came about, is I just got involved. I was tired of seeing people who were being elected that didn't necessarily look like me or shared my same values. And it frustrated me that I never got a chance to vote for a woman when I was growing up. And I never saw women leading in my community, even though we were doing all the work. So many of my friends and people who volunteered with me were women, and so many of us make great campaign advocates. I mean, we are the people who walk, we're the people who phone, and you know what women do really well? Raise money for other candidates. So we have all the ingredients to get people elected. And so I started to ask myself, what do I need to do to help women get elected? And I started to volunteer in women campaigns, but more importantly, I started to make sure that more women had a voice and more women that looked like me were running for office. So first of all, get involved. There's a campaign every other month almost. There is somebody running for office at least 2 or 3 times a year. We have city elections coming up March, which is in exactly a year from now. We've got an incredible presidential election coming up next year in 2020. There is no reason why women can't get involved. The other thing I will say, if you want to learn how we legislate, then follow up with me and my staff on our Ready for Women Fellowship. It's a paid fellowship program for college women who want to run for office. When women run for office, let's support one another. So many times we complain about representation, and oftentimes some of the negative feedback that I get, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes women can be the harshest with each other. So when we see women propelling for leadership positions, let's encourage them. Let's not beat them down. Let's make sure we're there encouraging them so that they can one day make sure that they're helping you when they get into that leadership position. And that's all I'm going to say. I think that we are living in incredibly exciting times. I have so much hope for this generation of young people who are getting civically involved and engaged, because we need you to make our jobs, we need you to tell us how to do our jobs better. And so I encourage all the young people that are in here to not only get involved locally, but get involved at every level that you can, because I think electoral politics is so important. So I want to give a big round of applause to all the young people that are here this evening, and for all of our partners who came out and make sure. We have teachers and counselors and principals in the audience who made sure they brought the young women here this evening. So I want to definitely thank you all of our partners who came out.